What if I told you there are still corners of America where you can step out of the noise without stepping out of the country? No passport, no new currency, and yes, your Costco card still works. Today, we're hitting 10 forgotten American towns where you can actually live free. But every paradise has a cost, and we'll talk about it straight. One spot on this list has fewer people than a busy coffee shop, yet it might be the strongest legal vanish zone left in the U.S. Number 10. Slab City, California. When people say America has no more frontiers, they've clearly never taken the dusty turnoff near an island and followed it until the pavement gives up. Out there, past the Salton Sea shimmer, you hit Slab City, an off-grid settlement on the concrete slabs of an old military base. It isn't a real town on paper, but in winter it feels like one. A rough, sun-bleached village that swells to a few thousand people, then shrinks to about 150 stubborn year-rounders when summer turns the sand into a skillet. The first thing that grabs you isn't a welcome sign, it's color. Salvation Mountain rises like a mirage, covered in painted clay and handwritten messages, proof that even in the middle of nowhere humans still build monuments to hope. A little deeper in, East Jesus sprawls across the desert. Cars turned into sculptures, junk reborn as art, a gallery with no ticket booth and no closing hours. Visitors come for the photos and the "what on earth is this" sort feeling, then leave with dust in their shoes and a grin they didn't expect. But Slab City isn't just a roadside curiosity. It's a thought experiment you can move into. No HOA, no dress code, no neighbor auditing your life. The rules are simple. Don't be a problem, and learn to solve your own. On a good day, that freedom tastes like coffee under a huge, quiet sky, your schedule answered only by the sun. On a bad day, it tastes like patching a water line with duct tape while your generator wheezes in protest. That's the trade. There's no city grid to catch you when you fall. Power is usually solar or generator, water is hauled, internet is a maybe. The heat can feel personal and the wind will rearrange anything you forgot to tie down. If you arrive expecting a cute desert getaway with reliable Wi-Fi, the place will chew up that fantasy before lunch. And yet people stay. Artists chasing quiet, RV nomads tired of rules, folks recovering from burnout or from life in general. Some chose this edge on purpose, others washed up here after everything else got too loud. Around evening fires, you'll hear both kinds of stories, and you realize Slab City isn't lawless so much as it is self-authored. The freedom is real, but so is the responsibility. So if your idea of living free is being left alone enough to hear your own thoughts, this might be your desert. If you need predictable comfort, sidewalks, and a fridge that never stops humming, Slab City will feel less like liberation and more like a dare. Either way, it leaves you with one dangerous, delicious question. How much of your old life was shelter, and how much was a cage? Number 9. Terlingua, Texas. If you drive far enough west in Texas, the map starts to feel like it's running out of confidence. The towns get thinner, the sky gets bigger, and your phone quietly accepts that it's no longer in charge. Then you reach Terlingua, a tiny desert CDP tucked beside Big Bend. Officially, it's a town of a few dozen souls, around 78 on paper, but in real life it breathes seasonally, swelling when the weather is kind and shrinking back when summer turns serious. Terlingua looks like a ghost town that decided not to die. Rusted relics, low-slung buildings, and that Old West backbone are still here, but they've been adopted by a loose tribe of hikers, artists, RV wanderers, and people who don't really enjoy being found. Visitors show up for the same reason you might. The vibe is half frontier postcard, half desert daydream. One minute you're walking through quiet ruins that feel like a movie set, the next you're sipping something cold while someone strums a guitar like time is optional. Out here, freedom doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives as silence. You can wake up in a cabin or an RV and hear wind in the creosote instead of calendar alerts. At night, the stars don't twinkle politely, they take over the whole sky. Big Bend is right there, offering trails that pull you into canyon shadows and ridge-top views that make your problems look like pocket change. And if you like your adventure with a splash, the Rio Grande is close enough for rafting days that feel like you borrowed someone else's life. But the desert always sends the bill. Terlingua is remote in a way that's romantic until you need something specific. Gas costs more because everything travels a long way to get here. Groceries can feel overpriced for what you're holding. Summer heat is not a mood, it's a force, and it will test whether you truly meant all that "I love the outdoors" talk. This isn't the kind of place you move to for convenience. It's the kind of place you move to so convenience stops bossing you around. The people match the landscape. Nobody grills you about your resume or your backstory. The first real question you'll get is more like, "You sticking around for a drink?" There's a gentle, unspoken rule in Terlingua: your past is yours, but your present had better be honest. Once you get that, you're in. And every year, just to prove the desert still knows how to throw a party, the town flips the switch on its famous chili cook-off. Thousands show up, dust and laughter in equal measure, and for a weekend, Terlingua feels less like the end of the road and more like the secret center of it. So here's the deal: if you're craving a reset, something quiet, raw, and a little wild, Terlingua can feel like breathing. Again, if your version of safety depends on quick services, constant signals, and crowded streets, this place might feel like you've stepped too far out. Either way, Terlingua leaves you with that sweet question you can't unthink. What happens to you when the world finally gets quiet? Number 8. Greater World Earthship Community, New Mexico. Some places make you feel free because they're far away. Greater World makes you feel free because your house is basically a little spaceship that doesn't need anyone's permission to keep you alive. You take a turn off the highway northwest of Taos, climb onto the high desert mesa, and suddenly the landscape looks like Mars got invited to a New Mexico barbecue. Scattered across the earth-colored hills are Earthships, more than 100 of them, built into the mesa like they grew there. And tucked inside those tire and bottle walls, about 130 to 150 full-time residents are living the quiet experiment of, what if my home did the work instead of my utility company? The first time you see one up close, it's hard not to grin. The windows tilt toward the sun like they're listening. A greenhouse hallway runs along the front, filled with citrus trees and herbs that look way too happy for a desert. The whole layout whispers a weirdly comforting idea. You can live here without begging the grid for mercy. Solar panels handle power. Thick earth-packed walls steady the temperature. Rainwater gets harvested. Plants clean the air while you make coffee. In a world where everything feels rented, this place sells a radical feeling of ownership over your own survival. If you want to taste that fantasy before you commit, you can. Earthship Biotecture rents out several homes by the night, so you can stay 2 nights, a week, even a month, and see what off-grid life feels like when it's done with style. People come as tourists expecting a quirky eco-stay. They leave quietly Googling land prices like they've just met a new version of themselves. But here's the part the brochures don't say loudly. Freedom in Greater World isn't a vacation. It's a skill. You have to enjoy learning how your water system breathes, how your batteries behave, how your greenhouse wants to be trimmed. The community is friendly, but no one is going to run your life for you. If your dream of freedom is never think about maintenance again, you'll feel tired fast. Still, there's a gentle warmth to the people who stay. Neighborly in a low-pressure way. If your pump acts up, someone will likely show you how they fixed theirs, then wave and let you go back to your quiet. Nobody here is trying to win at normal. They're trying to live like the future already happened. So who is this for? If you're the kind of person who gets excited by self-reliance, who finds peace in systems that make sense, Greater World can feel like the cleanest reset in America. If you want freedom but don't want to touch the engine, this place might feel less like a dream and more like homework. Either way, it leaves you with a calm, dangerous curiosity. What if your home could set you free, and you were finally ready to learn how? Number 7. Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. There's a moment on I-25 in southern New Mexico when the scenery goes soft and wide, like the desert is exhaling. Then you see the sign for Truth or Consequences, and you half expect a punchline. That name isn't a metaphor. This little town really did rename itself in 1950 after a radio game show just to win a publicity stunt. The wild part is it worked, and they've been happily weird ever since. Truth or Consequences is small, just under 6,000 people by most counts, so you feel the scale instantly. Downtown is a few blocks of vintage storefronts, murals, and art spaces that look like they belong on a road trip playlist. Every so often, the town throws an art hop night where galleries stay open, music spills onto the sidewalks, and strangers casually become neighbors for an evening. It's the kind of place where you can walk in without a plan and still feel like you arrived exactly where you were supposed to. But the real heartbeat here is water. Hot springs bubble up from the earth in a historic bathhouse district that feels like an old desert spa movie set, minus the pretension plus the stars. Visitors come to soak in mineral pools, then wander out with that loose-shouldered, slow-blinking calm you only get when your body remembers it's allowed to relax. The town sells that feeling quietly. No neon hype, just a gentle invitation. Stay a little longer, and people do. Retirees drift in for the warmth. Artists come because rent doesn't sprint away from them here. Remote workers show up thinking they'll stay a season, then realize the desert has a way of lowering your inner volume. Life runs on a softer clock. You can buy groceries, grab coffee, get your mail, and still feel like the day has room left over for you. Here's the catch. Truth or Consequences won't hand you a whole new career. Local jobs exist, but this isn't a booming metro. Many people make it work by bringing income from somewhere else. Online work, savings, or a slower form of hustle. If your happiness depends on constant upward momentum, this town might feel like it's asking you to step off the escalator. But if you're coming from burnout, from noise, from the endless faster, better, more, this place can feel like a reset button that doesn't yell at you while it works. You soak, you breathe, you remember what a quiet morning feels like, and somehow that's enough to make the name feel personal. Truth or Consequences. Not as a threat, but as a choice. So if your idea of living free includes healing without disappearing, a town that still feels like a town, and a pace that lets your thoughts catch up to you, Truth or Consequences might be your kind of desert miracle. And if not, no worries, because the next place on our list is freedom in a totally different costume. Number 6, Quartzsite, Arizona. When winter starts biting the north, there's a small dot in western Arizona that turns into a desert city almost overnight. Quartzsite sits sun-bleached near the California line, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked. Roughly 2,400 year-round residents, a few diners, a handful of gas stations, and a horizon that seems to go on forever. Then November arrives and the mirage becomes real. RVs roll in like migrating birds, and by peak season, the area hosts well over 1 million winter visitors, turning empty sand into a temporary town of awnings, campfires, and quiet rebellions. The magic trick starts with the land. Just south of town, the Bureau of Land Management runs the La Posa long-term visitor area, thousands of acres of public desert where you can camp from mid-September to mid-April with a simple seasonal pass. No resort gate, no front desk, no one asking why you still wear flip-flops in December. You park where the view feels right, crank out your awning, and suddenly your morning meeting is a pink sunrise and a kettle on a camp stove. Freedom here doesn't feel dramatic, it feels practical. It feels like space. And if desert camping sounds lonely, Quartzsite laughs at the idea. January and February bring the gym and mineral shows and endless swap meets. Long rows of tents sell rocks, antiques, solar gear, homemade salsa, spare RV parts, and whatever odd treasure someone hauled across 3 states. The gym shows alone pull more than 1 million people each winter, turning the town into a temporary bazaar. You might show up hunting for a cheap battery and end up spending 2 hours talking with a retired teacher about star maps, or learning how to fix a water pump from a guy who looks like he lives inside a road trip. Out here, community is something you assemble from scratch, and somehow it feels truer because of that. Of course, the desert collects its dues. Summer heat hits like a blunt truth. and Quartzsite drains back down to its quiet bones. Services are basic, medical care is limited, and living on public land means you're still responsible for your own comfort and common sense. If you need life to feel permanent and predictable, this place can feel like a beautiful temporary dream that forgot to promise stability. But if living free to you means mobility, sunlight, and a tribe that understands why you slipped out of the grid in the first place, Quartzsite feels like finding a loophole in modern America. You don't buy your way in, you just show up, breathe the desert air, and let the season remind you that some of the best chapters are the ones you can move whenever you want. Number 5. Grafton, New Hampshire. If the desert towns on this list feel like America turned the volume down, Grafton feels like America stepped outside and forgot to come back in. You drive through rural New England past maples and stone walls, and the world gets quieter in a way that feels almost old-fashioned. Grafton is tiny, hovering around 1,400 people in recent estimates, so the town doesn't sprawl, it concentrates. A village green, a few roads that slip into forests, and the kind of night sky that still looks like a real night sky. On paper, one of Grafton's biggest freedom signals is what it doesn't have: zoning laws. That means fewer checklists telling you what your land must look like, fewer rules deciding whether your dream cabin, small farm, or quiet workshop fits the neighborhood plan. The fantasy here is simple and powerful. Buy a patch of woods, build a life that makes sense to you, and let the seasons set the pace instead of a city ordinance. Visitors feel that looseness too. Grafton is the kind of place people come to when they want to breathe pine air and hear nothing but wind in the trees. And now there's a bonus reason to stop. Ruggles Mine has reopened to the public, letting you hike up the mountain, dig for minerals, and walk out with a bucket of glittering little souvenirs you found yourself. It's wholesome in a strangely primal way, like the town is reminding you that discovery doesn't need Wi-Fi. But Grafton's freedom has a second layer, and it comes with a cautionary tale. In the 2000s, a group of libertarian movers chose this town for a social experiment known as the Freetown Project, hoping to strip local government down to almost nothing. For a while, Grafton became a national symbol of radical self-reliance. The experiment didn't land the way anyone planned, and the town learned the hard way that less structure can mean more responsibility for neighbors who still have to share a place. You don't need to know every detail to feel the lesson. Freedom isn't the absence of rules. It's the presence of adults willing to carry their share. Then there's winter. New Hampshire doesn't do gentle cold. Roads get slick, storms come on their own schedule, and rural services are exactly that. Rural. If you want to live free here, you earn it by being prepared, not by pretending weather is a vibe. So who is Grafton for? If your idea of living free is space, quiet, and the right to shape your land without 1,000 permissions, this town can feel like a soft green reset. If you hate cold, hate self-reliance, or want freedom without community responsibility, Grafton will feel less like a refuge and more like a reminder. Either way, it leaves you wondering, how quiet would your life get if you stopped asking to be rescued by systems you've never loved? Number 4. Mentone, Texas. If you keep driving west in Texas long after the last normal town fades in your rear view, you eventually reach a place that feels like a secret the map forgot to delete. Mentone sits out in Loving County, the least populated county in America. The numbers are almost funny until you're standing there. Mentone is estimated at about 19 people in 2025, and the whole county is only around 4,850 souls. That's not small town America. That's small planet America. There's no downtown to get lost in, no traffic light to complain about. The road runs so straight and quiet that you start hearing your own thoughts like they're on surround sound. The silence isn't empty though, it's thick, like the desert is holding its breath. And right in the middle of that stillness stands the Loving County Courthouse, a 2-story 1935 building that somehow feels larger than the town around it, because it kind of is. It's the county seat, the tallest symbol of government for miles, and a reminder that even the most forgotten places are still officially part of the story. Most people don't come here for a vacation. They come to prove to themselves a place this empty can exist. They pull up, snap a photo, walk around the courthouse, maybe read a plaque, and feel that odd thrill of standing at the end of the map. It's not a tourist town. It's a check-in with your own curiosity. The freedom fantasy in Mentone is the purest kind. With so few people, nobody is watching your schedule, your choices, or your past. You could live here for months and still feel anonymous. No one asks who you were before you arrived. Out here, you don't escape the system with a dramatic exit. You just slip out the side door and the desert quietly closes it behind you. But the desert also makes sure you understand the trade. Mentone is remote in a way that's beautiful until you need help. Services are minimal because there's almost no one to support them, and the wider area is tied mostly to oil and gas activity rather than everyday small-town life. If you need a hospital nearby, a grocery store around the corner, or even a regular social circle, this place can feel less like freedom and more like waiting for the world to load. Still, there's a strange calm here that's hard to explain unless you felt it. Mentone doesn't hand you entertainment, it hands you space. The kind of space where a morning coffee feels like an event, where sunsets don't compete with anything, and where time stretches out like it's finally on your side. So who is Mentone for? If your version of living free is absolute quiet, maximum distance from noise, and the ability to disappear without leaving America, this might be your holy grail. If your idea of freedom still needs people, services, and a little daily buzz, Mentone will feel too empty to hold you. Either way, it plants one gentle, unsettling question in your head. How much freedom can you handle when there's nothing left to distract you? Number 3, Riley, Kansas. Some towns whisper freedom by being wild. Riley, Kansas whispers freedom by being quietly practical. You find it out on the Flint Hills edge, a prairie town small enough that you can learn the rhythm in a weekend. The latest estimates put Riley at under 1,000 people, give or take, which means the place is not trying to impress anyone. It is the kind of town where the sky feels bigger than the schedule, and a traffic jam usually means a pickup pausing for a tractor. Riley does not sell itself as a destination, and that is part of the charm. Visitors pass through for farm country calm, maybe a slice of homemade pie, maybe a quick detour before heading toward Manhattan and Kansas State, or out to Tuttle Creek Lake for a low-key afternoon on the water. Nothing here screams for attention. It just sits there steady, like a porch light in the dark. But the real reason Riley belongs on this list is not the scenery. It is the kind of freedom you can build. In the unincorporated parts of Riley County, the county requires a building permit mainly to confirm zoning, setbacks, and sanitation, but it has not adopted a county-wide building code. That sounds boring until you realize what it means in real life. It means if you want a tiny home, a simple cabin, a workshop, a homestead layout that makes sense to you instead of a city checklist, the door is at least cracked open. You are not fighting a stack of rules that were written for people living 3 feet apart in a subdivision. That is the fantasy. Cheap land, loose red tape, a chance to design a life around what you actually need. Imagine waking up to grass moving like ocean waves, stepping outside with coffee and knowing your house exists because you built it your way, not because a committee approved the shade of your siding. Then comes the honest part. Prairie life is slow on purpose. Entertainment is not delivered hourly. If you need concerts, nightlife, or the constant buzz of new choices, you will have to drive for it. And if your income is remote, you will want to take internet seriously and plan ahead, because small towns do not always assume you are living online. Still, the human scale here feels good. People in Riley are not performing community. They just practice it. You get waves from strangers, you get real conversations, you get the Midwest version of kindness, which is quiet help offered before you even think to ask. So Riley is not freedom as an escape hatch. It is freedom as a blueprint. If you want a practical reset with room to build, breathe, and live cheaper without disappearing into nowhere, Riley is a soft landing. If you are addicted to city velocity, the quiet might feel too loud. Either way, it leaves you with a calm curiosity that lingers after you drive out. What would your life look like if home was something you designed, not something you rented from the system? Number 2. Talkeetna, Alaska. There are towns that feel free because they're quiet. Talkeetna feels free because it sits at the edge of something enormous. You roll north from Anchorage, and the road starts threading through spruce forests and river flats that look like they've never heard the word deadline. Then Talkeetna appears, small and scrappy with a 2025 population right around 1,086 people. It's not a city trying to grow up. It's a village that decided staying real was the whole point. In summer, that realness becomes a magnet. Talkeetna is the front door to Denali, the kind of place where tourists show up wide-eyed and in the day looking a little stunned. The big draw is flight seeing, small bush planes lifting off from a simple airstrip, climbing toward the Alaska Range, circling the glaciers, and sometimes touching down on ice like it's the most normal thing in the world. You don't have to be a climber to feel the thrill. You just need to look out the window once and realize your problems have never been this small. But Talkeetna isn't only a summer postcard. The town has a core of artists, guides, lodge owners, and outdoors people who treat wilderness like a neighbor. Downtown is a handful of wooden buildings, cafes, and quirky shops where you can buy a cinnamon roll bigger than your hand and a handmade carving in the same 10-minute walk. There's a gentle, slightly mischievous pride in the air. This is the town that famously had a cat mayor for years, which tells you everything about the local attitude toward taking life too seriously. The freedom fantasy here comes as cabin life and seasonal rhythm. You work when the land lets you work. You rest when the dark comes early. You measure time by salmon runs, snow lines, and how the river sounds in the morning. In a world addicted to constant motion, Talkeetna's pace feels like choosing your own heartbeat. Then winter arrives and asks if you meant it. Alaska winters are long, cold, and logistical in a way that's both beautiful and demanding. Supplies cost more, roads get rough, and the quiet deepens into something that can either heal you or haunt you. Freedom in a cold place isn't a vibe. It's a skill you earn, layer by layer, plan by plan, and sometimes by laughing when your plans fail anyway. And that's why people stay. Not because it's easy, but because it feels honest. Talkeetna doesn't flatter you with convenience. It offers something rarer, the chance to live close to real weather, real neighbors, and real silence. If you're the kind of person who wants nature to be big enough to change you, this town can feel like a doorway to your truest self. If you need warmth on demand and the world within arm's reach, Talkeetna will feel too far, too cold, too real. Either way, it leaves you with a calm, electrifying question. What version of you shows up when the land is louder than the internet? And if you want a different kind of freedom, one that comes with a stronger sense of belonging, our next stop flips the script. Number 1. Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage, Missouri. When you hear off-grid, you probably picture a lone cabin hiding from the world. Dancing Rabbit flips that image. It sits on 280 acres of rolling prairie near the tiny village of Rutledge, Missouri, and it is home to about 70 residents who are not running away from society so much as rebuilding it. Rutledge itself is barely a dot on the map, 86 people at the 2020 census, and roughly the low 80s now, so the whole area feels like a quiet back room of America. Driving in, you do not see manicured gates or a grand welcome. You see gardens, natural buildings, solar panels catching sun, and paths that look walked in by real feet. The air feels slower, like everyone agreed that life is allowed to take its time. People wave not because it is a rule, but because they recognize you are a person, not a passing car. Here is the fantasy that hooks most newcomers. Freedom here is not the freedom to vanish. It is the freedom to choose a different operating system. Homes are built from natural or reclaimed materials. Electricity comes from renewable sources. Food leans organic and local. Consumption is kept small on purpose. And the village is self-governed by shared ecological covenants, so the community stays aligned on why it exists. For people tired of noise, waste, and lonely convenience, that feels less like a lifestyle and more like a quiet rebellion. But Dancing Rabbit is not a resort wearing a green costume. If you come, you participate. There is a 2-week visitor program where you live alongside others, learn the systems, and feel the rhythm before you decide if it fits you. The expectation is simple: you respect the covenants. You contribute to the place you are enjoying. You do not just consume the vibe, you help make it. That is also the secret warmth here. The community is not perfect, but it is intentional. People share tools, meals, skills, and a kind of quiet accountability that feels more like family than bureaucracy. You can be private, but you are not invisible. If you have ever wanted neighbors who know you for who you are becoming, not who you were, this place hits deep. So who is this for? If your idea of living free includes belonging, learning, and building something that lasts, Dancing Rabbit can feel like a gentle revolution you get to live inside. If you want freedom with zero ties and zero expectations, you may find the prairie here a little too connected. Either way, it leaves a soft question hanging in your head. What if the freest life is not the one you escape to, but the one you help design with others? So that's our ride through 10 of America's forgotten towns, and each one shows a different flavor of freedom. In some places, freedom means disappearing into the desert and letting silence reset your nervous system. In others, it means building a life with your own hands, on your own land, without 100 rules hovering over your shoulder. And sometimes freedom looks like waking up near glaciers or prairie grass and letting nature set the pace instead of your calendar. The common thread is simple. These towns don't ask you to perform. They ask you to live in a way you can actually sustain. Now, I want to hear from you. Which town hit you the hardest, and what trade-off would you be willing to make for that kind of life? Drop your pick in the comments. If this video gave you a new way to think about living free, tap like to support the channel and subscribe to Odin Wander, because next we're heading into the 5 states where off-grid living is surprisingly doable. See you in the next one.